It's really weird. That clock's running a little late. All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6:32 on December 14th, and this is the regular meeting of the Fitchburg Transportation and Transit Commission. We'll note that we have quorum. Everybody is here except the Public Works representative. We did not hear from him, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I will check with Dina.
Okay. Is there anyone here for something that's not on the agenda? Susan or Jay? Hearing none.
No, we're
I know you're
only here for 6P.
checking. Next item is the approval of the draft agenda that you have before you. And I would recommend, so that we have our visitor Colleen for it, that we move up 7C right after 5A. So that way we will have all the Vision Zero and safety things together.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And any other discussion on the agenda?
I wonder if we should move 6B ahead of 6A, just so that these guys can do their thing first.
That would be good if you want to make that motion.
I'll move that.
Second. All right. So thank you, Micah, for the second. Any other changes to the agenda? Staff report. Yeah. Do you have a staff report that you were going to make?
Yeah.
Okay. Since it's not an action item, it's just a presentation, I think that would be fine to add a staff report, even though it's not noticed.
And what about council report?
I think we're going to be running out of time. Let's not add a council report.
You know, do things under announcements if we need to.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. All right, so who moved the staff report? Was that
Me.
Micah and Gabriella second?
Oh, sorry.
All right, on those amendments, there are 3 of them. We'll take them together. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Are there, on the main motion to approve the agenda, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are unanimous of the 6 of us here. So that brings us to the approval of the minutes from October 12th. Any discussion on, let's have a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And any discussion or corrections that anybody wants to make? Look good to me. All right, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of accepting the minutes as final, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that's done. All right, I am delighted that Colleen Hosley, a transportation planner from the MPO, can be here with us today. The MPO has been working on a regional safety plan that we will be that we're very lucky to have to base our future work on, and she's going to tell us all about it.
Yes, thank
And there
you.
will be a presentation.
Let's see if I can get this.
Now, Colleen, I looked at your slides. I would suggest that we go flashing by. You probably planned this, the overall map.
Yep.
And just go right to the Fitchburg ones.
Yep.
That'll be great, because there is a ton of information. I'm hoping that we can give her all the time she needs so that we don't have to beg her to come back if we need more help.
Well, and I will say we are more than happy to provide assistance throughout your whole planning process. And I guess kind of where we're at with our safety action plan, we haven't quite finalized it yet. There's going to still be some more work coming out. So there may be still some more information that you guys are interested in seeing again later. So
Very, very good.
So I'm happy to keep on coming out as often as you need me to.
All right, that's a great offer. The floor is yours.
All Right. So I thought before we get into the presentation, and these weren't in the slides that I think were sent out, but just in case you don't have know a whole lot about the MPO, thought a little bit of background information. So here you can see the map of our planning area. So MPOs are federally required for any urban area that has greater than 50,000 population to coordinate transportation, funding, and planning initiatives. So here you can see our governance structure. We are made up of a 14-member policy board, and you can see with the colors here, we have 5 City of Madison representatives, 1 from transit. Towns get 1 representative, 3 from suburban communities, 3 from Dane County, and then WISDOT has a seat on that as well. And just kind of, again, high-level overview of what the MPO does and what we don't do. We bring communities together to prioritize, coordinate, and fund transportation projects in our region. We develop a long-range regional transportation plan that looks ahead 20 to 30 years. We just approved our most recent one early last year, and that had recommendations in it to develop this safety action plan that I will be presenting on. We collect data and develop and support special plans and studies, and communities can request assistance on any transportation plans that they're working on. We approve the federal funding for projects. It goes into what's called the TIP. It's the Transportation Improvement Program. So you can see everything that is programmed for funding for the next 5 years. And then we manage, it's called Round Trip Greater Madison, which is a rideshare platform. What the MPO does not do, we don't design, construct, or maintain roads or bike paths. We don't control or enforce traffic laws. We don't operate transit service, and we don't plan how land is used. We're strictly advisory on the transportation side of things.
I would add that we all know, and including everybody at the MPO, that land use and transportation have to be planned together. Land use is planned by our Capital Area Regional Plan Commission. They are friends and they share space and they cooperate, so we are lucky to have that synergy.
Yes, so getting into the genesis of our Regional Safety Action Plan. So for the past several years, I think back pre-pandemic, 2019, the MPO undertook our first more comprehensive safety study. We did an intersection safety analysis that included over 4,000 intersections within our planning area, and we were able to go through and rank the safety of the intersections based off of severity, crash frequency, crash rate, things like that. And following along with that project, we then expanded it to start looking at developing a high injury network. And right around that time was when the new infrastructure bill came out that introduced the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And the Safe Streets and Roads for All program is a federal discretionary program that has $5 billion in appropriated funds over the next 5 years to promote safety, employ low-cost, high-impact strategies, ensure equitable investment, and it's based on evidence-based, data-driven projects. To be eligible for this funding, or what the funding can be used for, is to develop or update a comprehensive safety action plan, which is what we are currently working on. They can include conducting planning, design, and developmental activities in support of an approved action plan, and carry out projects and strategies that are identified in that action plan. And I will talk about the actual grant program itself and some of the opportunities at the end of the presentation. But so when this program came out, as I said, we had been in the process of some of these safety kind of data studies, and we wanted a way to kind of package them together and start looking at a regional safety plan. And since this had some funding opportunities that would go along with it, we decided that we would follow this template for setting up that safety action plan. I think an important thing from the MPO side of things, while we do want this plan to make us potentially eligible for some of this Safe Streets and Roads for All program funding, we're also looking at how it can be used across many different funding programs and some of the work that the MPOs is doing, and being able to help communities as well. So there are 8 required components of a safety action plan that have to be in there to be eligible for the implementation funding. Implementation is the project side of things, the construction funding. And these safety plan components are pretty closely aligned with the Vision Zero network and the recommended components from Vision Zero. So the first one, and one of the most important ones, is the leadership and goal setting. It's required with this plan, and I think I have more of it on the next slide, that with that leadership commitment, there needs to be an adopted resolution showing either a commitment of zero or an ambitious reduction to get to zero. And it's looking at that leadership commitment as, since really kind of the foundations of Vision Zero, it's not just housed within traffic engineering, it's such a multifaceted approach to be able to achieve Vision Zero that you really need it, supported and driven at the high up level to integrate it across all departments and initiatives. The next one is a planning structure. So the way that we have our plan set up is we have a technical coordinating committee. Ross is a member of that, made up of kind of the planners and engineers from our local communities. And then we have our policy board, and the plan will be adopted through those committees. There's also the Dane County Traffic Safety Commission. The MPO is a member of that organization. They have done a lot of work recently, especially on the behavioral and enforcement side of things. So our plan is looking a little bit more at the infrastructure-based solutions and education-based solutions, and integrating the work that the Dane County Traffic Safety Commission has been doing. There's been a lot of safety work going on in the region. We didn't want to duplicate anything. We wanted to build off of that and bring it all together in this regional document. We've completed our safety analysis, so that's looking at 3 to 5 years worth of crash data, identifying hotspots, and the typical recommendation with the safety action plan is developing a high injury network, which we have done as well. Again, with the agents or the engagement and collaboration, we've brought in what's already been done within the region. Equity consideration is a big part of the regional safety action plan. Any of the federal grants now, they have Justice 40, where they're trying to prioritize 40% of that funding to some of the traditionally underserved communities. And so we do have analysis included in the plan looking at some of those locations, an analysis of policy and process changes. We are currently in the strategy and project selection phase. We're working with a great consultant that's helping us out with this. And they are looking at the results of the safety analysis. They're doing a systemic analysis. There'll be results for each community, and then there will be a recommendation of strategies in order to try and address some of those common crash types, concerns, things like that. And then finally, there's a requirement for the progress and transparency. So showing, having performance measures, doing at least an annual report showing what's been done and the progress that we need to go to achieve these goals. So I think I can skip past this one. So this is, again, the leadership commitment and goal setting, which I went over. So our policy board met we'll go on this one, last Wednesday. And during that policy meeting, we had a goal setting session for this plan. And we reviewed again that Vision Zero, it's not the slogan, it's not a tagline, it's not just a program, it's a fundamental different way of approaching traffic safety. Business as usual doesn't work. We're not seeing a reduction in crashes over the past 10 years. We're seeing an increase when Europe, Canada, Australia is seeing a decrease in crashes. So we have to change the way we're looking at what we're doing with traffic safety. And so after quite a bit of discussion, our policy board has decided to set a goal of 0 roadway fatalities and serious injuries on our regional roadways by 2040. This will be done this goal will go into our draft plan and be available for public comment. And then when we adopt the plan, that's when we will have from our policy board the resolution formally adopting the 0 by 2040 goal. So we were very excited that they decided to set that goal. There was discussions about whether or not it would be a 50% reduction within a certain amount of years, and that there was very strong support that we don't want to say any amount of roadway fatalities are okay and acceptable, and we need to think big in order to, again, change that business as usual and get to 0 fatalities. So getting into the plan, the work that we currently have completed is developing our high injury network and crash profiles. A little bit of background with this. We are very lucky to have the UW in our backyard. The TOPS lab is the traffic operation. I always get the letters. Traffic Operations and Safety Laboratory. And they put together this very detailed methodology for a high injury network. Most high injury networks typically just look at kind of a hotspot analysis. Where are all the crashes? That's how it's based on. Our methodology looked at 2017 to 2020 data, and we are planning on updating that in the future and continuously updating this information. And they developed a it's a very detailed crash prediction model. The statistics on it, you would have had to have very advanced statistics class to look at it and follow some of it. But the purpose of the way that we set it up is it's looking at high-risk locations based on the difference in observed and predicted collisions. So even though we're using this 2017 to 2020 data to develop these models, we have data going back to, I believe it's before 2010, looking at how intersections and segments have performed throughout that whole time. And then looking at crashes that happened within this, again, 2017 to 2020 timeframe, and it helps from the statistical analysis get away from regression to the mean. In other words, you're not just reactively chasing around crashes that might occur randomly. It's looking at, okay, these are intersections, these are segments based on roadway volume, based on stop control or street lights. This is how we would expect. This is kind of the average number of crashes we would expect there based on what we've seen across the rest of the region. And instead, we're either seeing a lot more than that or less than that. Therefore, those are the areas that we really should be looking at as part of this high injury network.
Can you take the question?
Yes.
From what I understand, and I want to validate this, what they are doing in this analysis, instead of looking at crash data, is they're looking at crash data and segment or an intersection characteristics.
Correct.
And then they are using the data on particular kinds of segments and particular kinds of intersections and applying that to similar intersections and segments respectively throughout the region, so that for an intersection, for example, to be marked unsafe, it doesn't have to have had a crash. It has to be of a type that has experienced crashes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Typically, you're gonna see in most of the areas crashes having occurred. I will say one of the hallmarks of this program and then how this high injury network is developed is it does look at fatal and serious injury crashes. But to develop the model, it has property damage only crashes, it has A, B, some of those minor. So taking into account too, if there's a high number of property damage only crashes or lower injury crashes and the characteristics of that roadway or intersection, it might say, okay, we haven't had a really bad crash here yet, but based on the crash history and these roadway characteristics, if we don't do something about it, we might see something more serious come in the future there. All right, so again, this is just the overview to see our high injury network region-wide. And so this particular map is just showing our segments. And so segments are defined as between intersection to intersection or corridors. And then later we have the intersection. And so again, using that methodology, it's highlighting our high injury network segments here. I had statistics that don't want to show up here. It doesn't look like. Where we're seeing a lot of these crashes are on multi-lane arterials. We are seeing them of speeds on average on posted speed limits of 25 to 45. So a lot of speeding related crashes on those lower posted roadways. Yes.
I was wondering if you had a similar chart, but like normalized to, million crashes per million vehicle miles traveled or something like that.
So I don't have it here. We do have all of the data that's in this map, in all of our maps. There's a lot of data there, and we can provide it as you are working on various safety initiatives. So we have some of that crash rate data. The reason we went with this methodology, if you're just looking at crash frequencies, so the number of crashes someplace, that tends to skew towards roadways that have much more traffic volumes on it. If you're just looking at crash rate, then a lower volume road that doesn't have a whole lot of traffic on it and has one crash there, you're gonna see that pop up. And so this methodology is based again on severity and roadway characteristics. It takes into account the traffic volumes, things like that, to look at all of those different characteristics.
Okay, so what we saw there was not just based on raw accident data.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. The high injury this high injury network is based on the observed crashes,
model.
the predicted, and that background roadway characteristic.
Okay. Cool.
Do you differentiate like auto on auto versus pedestrian
Yes.
likelihood? Okay.
Yes, and so I can provide you, I can send a link to the methodology report. The first time that we went through and did the intersection safety analysis, again, the TOPS lab has been a great resource. They were able to break it down to get the severity. It's called equivalent property damage only. The way that it's set up is it's putting a cost to a human life to say, okay, that's how we're normalizing it. And so that brings in, it's linked to our local hospital crash data. And it is broken down by vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, and vehicle to bicycle. And so within developing the high injury network, the vulnerable roadway users, the vehicle and pedestrian and the vehicle bicycle crashes tend to have a higher weight than just vehicle to vehicle.
Question.
Yeah.
Just an observation here. It looks like the north-south BRT route is kind of colored in red, whereas the east-west is not. I'm wondering, how does BRT play into the calculus in all of this?
Well, and I think one of the things to point out again, this data is based on 2017 to 2020 data.
Sure.
So I think, moving forward, I know Madison, is very much looking at integrating their Vision Zero work across the board and looking at that. They just got awarded funding through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, and I believe the funding that they applied for is looking at, again, the vulnerable roadway users and transit corridors. I haven't gotten a chance to look through the full award, but I think that was one of the things that they were focusing on with their grant application.
By the same token, another hot spot is our West Lacey Road segment between Seminole and Fitchburg that has recently been completely reconstructed to modern safety standards. So this is very backwards looking.
Yes.
And we will have to titrate that against what has already been done in the way of interventions.
Yes.
Just an anecdote on Lacey Road. The lanes are narrower than I think anywhere else in the city, and I had occasion to drive both ways on it, and I did feel myself slowing down. I mean, people have told me that striping roads does not slow traffic down, and in fact, sometimes makes people drive faster, but me personally, I did feel like slowing down a bit. So.
It's not something you can pull up for speeding on it, others, so also be careful. They're patrolling it because they just dropped the speed limit, so.
Oh.
And I will say, as we were going through and developing these high injury networks, or the network in October and November, we met with staff from each of the municipalities to review the results and work with our consultant to note, okay, what kind of projects have been constructed since this time. The data itself, I think, is still valuable to have in terms of before and after analysis. Okay, we've done something here. We knew it was a high injury corridor intersection before. Let's look at it again, 2, 3, 4, 5 years after we've done something here and see if that solved the problem or if there's still more that needs to be done. And I think the other important thing too is this is looking at it from a planning level, especially as a regional planning organization. We can't go through, there was 4,000 intersections. I don't have it off the top of my head how many roadway segments are in there. We had to come up with some way to be able to take that high-level snapshot of the region. Couldn't go in and look at every single intersection, look at every single roadway segment, and look at every crash that happened there and say, yep, this is a problem, this isn't. This is helping us say, okay, something's going on here, now let's dive into it a little bit deeper and see if it's something that we can address. So here you can see how Fitchburg stacks up against the rest of the area. Again, this is our segment. So Madison, no surprise, has the majority of the high injury network at 40%. City of Fitchburg is second on the list here, making up 9% of the high injury network. Again, I think the important caveat that you'll see as we start looking at the more detailed Fitchburg maps, when we're talking about jurisdiction, that includes WISDOT roadways, that includes county highways, so Verona Road, everything going on there. And so you can see here, behind Fitchburg is Middleton, and then the rest of our area is somewhere between 3 to 4% of that network.
Question. Is there a typo, or am I just unaware that there is a town of Sun Prairie in addition to the city?
There is a town of Sun Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
So the city is
just like the
not
town of
even
Verona.
right. But it's interesting that the city of Sun Prairie doesn't even make the list here.
Yeah. So if
You see 151 running through it?
that's actually with Sun Prairie, it's N makes up quite a bit of that, County Highway N, which lights up on here.
Yeah, part of it is, like Colleen said, there's a lot of the the higher speed county roads and state roads that can go through the middle of a town and have a lot more mileage in a 6 mile by 6 mile town than a 2 mile by 2 mile city.
That's why we rank up there with the towns.
Yeah, you have a lot larger area than some of the other communities. And so then this is the intersection network screening. Again, at this level, it's hard to see, but you can see downtown Madison definitely lights up. But you know, really, we see these at higher. It's a pretty good distribution between higher volume roadways and kind of moderate volume roadways, really throughout the region. And so here we can see again, looking at Fitchburg across against the rest of the area. Madison is the highest again, 57%, followed by Fitchburg, 6%, which is 70 intersections within Fitchburg show up as on the high entry network here.
Now you can see that Sun Prairie jumps up there because they got lots of intersections.
Yeah, but
We just gotta fix 3 and then they'll go.
And you've done that. You've done some big intersections,
Yes,
so
true.
there you go. So, and I will say, I haven't gotten a chance to do a deep dive on some of these high entry network. We just got them from our consultant late on Tuesday. So starting to go through it and, you know, kind of digest community by community what we have
it's been a day and a half. What do you
going on here.
This is why this didn't make the packet.
So this shows the high entry network for city of Fitchburg. You know, again, we have the note down below that the high entry network is based off of 2017 to 2020 data, and segments and intersections that are highlighted on the map may have been addressed by improvements after this time period. And we'll see after when we can go back and do a look back and see how we're doing. But so for instance, you know, we're seeing on here Lacey and Seminole Highway, McKee, quite a bit on Fish Hatch.
Question is it possible to go someplace now, right now, but to look in detail at some of these red mark, why there are certain intersections are red and others not? Is there a database someplace that?
When she talks about intersection types and segment types in a second, we're gonna see some of that, I think.
Yes, and like I said, we have all of the raw data, so any of these, once you want to start digging in, you can click in and see again what the rates, what all of the information behind it, as well as the individual crashes themselves.
I think the other thing to note is that, like you said, you're still working on this too, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but is that something I can go online later and? These things? No.
This is still draft.
There you go.
Yeah. So the safety plan, as Colleen said, will be coming out, be adopted later or early next year. You know, then that'll release it publicly, but right now this is kind of subject to revision. Then once it's public and the methodologies there, and then municipality will be able to go to the MPO and say, ship us the spreadsheets or the database for our intersections or our segments. And we'll be able to see the attributes in the attribute table.
It would be cool if eventually this is an online tool and it tied into the Wisconsin community maps thing that, you know, with all the crashes
Yep.
from the police reports.
Yep, so, and that's what powers this, and the database that powers community maps is the same that's used, the crash database. And so, and I think Ross probably has access to this, we at the MPO have access to this, where, you know, if you see an area that you're concerned about and want to do additional analysis, we can go back and we can pull all of those crash reports and actually see, you know, there were 10 crashes here and 5 of them were run off the road or pedestrian, we can actually start digging into those areas once we, are able to kind of narrow it down a little bit and say, okay, these are the areas we want to look at and try and figure out more what's going on here. And so then the other thing that we've done is develop crash profiles, and as you can see here, we're looking at crash characteristics, and that's what caused or was flagged as causing a crash, and then contextual factors, which is more of the roadway factors that I had mentioned before, traffic volumes, is it signalized speeds, things like that. And looking at all of this data, looking at all crashes, and then also just fatal and injury crashes, we developed crash profiles for each mode, for vehicles, for pedestrians, and for bicycle crashes, and highlighted what are the four things that we're really seeing jump out.
What's the difference between injury, fatal, and severe injury?
Let's see.
Fatal is fatal only.
Well,
Yeah,
they both
they
say
both
fatal
have
in both
fatal.
of them. Yep.
So
One
the
is a subset of the other.
yes, yes. So the severe injury and fatal are either on their scale, it's a serious injury, it's
The
an
only
A.
difference is the injury.
Yeah,
severity is
yeah.
the only difference between the two.
Yeah. The
I'm
level
curious
of
what
it.
K stands for.
It's fatality.
Killed.
Straight up.
Is that
I was
what it
thinking
stands
KO.
for? I assumed it was just a random letter.
Well, since the injury fatal had an F and the serious injury fatal did not have an F, I didn't know what was.
It also means strikeout.
So this is showing the regional crash profiles. So as we can see here for vehicle, the three that are popping out are crashes on multi-lane arterials. Again, that's where you typically have higher speeds, you have more volumes. Turning vehicles at signalized intersections, and roadway departures in rural areas. For bicycle vehicle crashes, I should note it's not, it has to involve a vehicle to be included in the study, so it's not just.
Okay, so some of us here are activists, and so bicycles are vehicles, so when you're saying vehicle, you mean motor vehicle, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just to be clear.
Yep, that is a good clarification. Yes, so a motor vehicle has to be involved in the crash for it to be included here. So under bicycle crashes, we see them at signalized intersections and at uncontrolled intersections. I don't think either one of those are a big surprise. Roads without bike infrastructure, I will note, as we've gotten the data back on this, we have to review how bike infrastructure is being defined in the database. That one might change a little bit. And you'll see kind of through all of these crash profiles, again, we see multi-lane arterials pop up here. And then for motor vehicle and pedestrian crashes, the predominant crash profiles are commercial areas, multi-lane arterials again, hit and run crashes, and mid-block crossings.
Are the numbers, like the actual injuries between 2017 and 2020, not annualized? They're just
Correct.
the total, okay.
Yep, for those years, yep. And so, yeah, you can see
It
that.
still seems like a lot for 4 years.
It does.
That's why people are calling this a crisis.
And I know it's gonna be hard to see on this map. Again, we haven't had time to really dig into this very much, but I wanted to include it in the packet that went out so that, you guys have a chance to have this in front of you as you start having some of the other discussions. Not all of the crash profile types show up in Fitchburg. Most of them do. So here we can see, so the dark red dot, it looks like we've got 2 fatal crashes showing up. So the dots on here are now looking at the crashes that actually occurred 2017 to 2020. So it's not just the high injury network, these are the crashes.
Fish Hatchery, McKee, Verona Road,
Yeah, those ones are exactly where
South
you'd
Fish
expect.
Hatchery.
Yep. You know, again, the turning, vehicles turning at signalized intersections, I think a lot of those are where you would expect along McKee, along Fish Hatch.
Yeah, this is basically a map of our signalized intersections.
Yep. With the rural roadway departure crashes, most of the other communities that we're working with don't have to worry about this as much since you have much more rural area. We see that pop up here. And I will say, you know, typically with your roadway departure crashes, not all the time, but more often than not, those are usually single vehicle crashes. Our bicycle crashes at signalized intersections. Let's see, it's looking like McKee and Richardson.
Yeah.
Is what's
Yep,
showing up
McKee.
here.
Yep, that's Richardson and
McKee and Commerce Park.
Commerce. I'm not seeing any others.
Is one on Verona Road?
I think it's probably on the bridge
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Williamsburg Way.
Yep. And again, the ones that are showing up here are classified the lesser injuries, not the fatal or severe. And you'll see several of the crashes will be shown across several of the profiles. They might have several of these characteristics. So then here we have the bicycle crashes at unsignalized intersections.
Sorry, what is environmental justice area? I missed that. What does that mean?
So the environmental justice area, I should have our methodology written down of what it is, but that's looking at the areas that are either a low income or minority population that have levels that are higher than kind of the regional average. And so this is kind of getting back to those equity considerations as we go forward and we start looking at some of the recommended strategies and things that we want to do, you know, taking into account if we have an area in a focus area showing up in a tract that's been traditionally underserved, hasn't had the same amount of investment as, you know, other areas in our region. Those are typically within the Safe Streets and Roads for All program gonna have a better shot at getting funding.
Kind of like reverse redlining.
Yes.
In Fitchburg, it's basically our Healthy Neighborhood Initiative areas, although the boundaries differ in detail. I can't speak to that big central area that mostly E-way, but I do know that census blocks are very large in that area, and these analyses are done by census block. And you've got to have they use Nine Springs Creek as a census block boundary because, you know, there's no boundaries through there. So one of our largest census blocks.
Yeah, and these were developed so the federal government for HUD, for FHWA, they all have kind of the same definition of what they're looking at as what's considered environmental justice. So anything that's showing up on here is consistent with what they're doing. Here we have the bicycle crashes along multi-lane arterials. For pedestrian, we didn't see, at least by definition, the pedestrian crashes in what were considered commercial areas as we did in some of our other municipalities. I think that's interesting to know.
Rose Road?
Yeah.
Greenway Cross, or, no, that's Pike Drive.
No, you're right. Thought it was Post
That is
Road.
kind of a commercial.
I think there is one that goes through those.
There are a few truly commercial
Yeah.
areas.
I will jot that down.
It's my district.
And then I think our final crash profile here are pedestrian crashes at mid-block crossings.
Anybody see any?
Area, it's the
Yes.
same
It's
area.
let's say, yeah.
Oh, I can see them up there now in the Leopold, or Greenway Cross neighborhood.
Yeah, it's the yellow one, yellow stuff.
But those aren't mid-block crossings. Oh,
Some of them, two of them are. One of them is a little bit away from an
It's
intersection.
right near the Madison border though, isn't it? Don't know what they're called.
they're one of our hooks that are surrounded by Madison on three sides.
Yeah.
And I will say, I think the definition of a mid-block crossing is anything that occurred outside of a crosswalk.
Okay, so we're not talking about where the Badger crosses Lacey, where you have a marked mid-block.
Correct, yep, it's not marked, it's a pedestrian that's crossing it where it's not a crosswalk.
So it could be at an intersection, if there's no crosswalk at that intersection.
You mean marked crosswalk? No, that would
Correct.
still be at the intersection. Right?
Is that true?
Because crosswalks, I don't know whether they're marked or not.
Oh, yeah, I think that's how, I'll have to verify that, but I
If
think
there are
that's
no
how it is.
sidewalks at the intersection, then there are no crosswalks. But if there's a sidewalk, even if the crosswalk is not marked, like
Oh,
no
interesting.
bell
Yeah,
and fish
yeah.
hatchery, there's no markings, but,
Okay.
but it's still a crosswalk.
So if there's a skirt that leading to the
There's
road,
curb range,
then
yeah.
it's technically a crosswalk, even if there's no marked crosswalk. Okay.
Apron, not skirt.
Perfect.
And so our next there's quite a few slides in here. I'm not planning on going into detail on them. Again, it's in here kind of as reference for you guys to see as you go into discussion beyond this. So our next step where we're at in our planning process is, again, kind of this prioritization and identification of strategies. And so we've reviewed these crash characteristics and contextual factors. And so for each of these crash profiles that were developed, there'll be several potential safety strategies that would be recommended for looking at to try and address some of those concerns. We're working on completing a systemic safety analysis, looking at how the whole network is working. Which, as we see here, prioritizes the locations at high risk for the fatal and severe crashes, and identify potential strategies. And the next set of slides, we met with WISDOT and some other folks. The Safe Streets and Roads for All program prioritizes proven safety countermeasures. So if we're going to be spending money, studies have been done to show you can expect a significant safety benefit. So all of the strategies that you'll see coming up are based off of what these proven countermeasures are and what can be used in Wisconsin. One, as I'm sitting here thinking, I think important caveat that I didn't mention in the beginning as we were talking about safety, the high injury network, this type of analysis is looking at where crashes are occurring and have occurred, just because, especially if you're looking at pedestrians, there's not a crash history there saying, oh, that's a safe intersection, it's not on there. Oftentimes this can't take into account the near misses, the people feeling like this is such an unsafe intersection, I'm not gonna travel here. That's not being picked up and highlighted in this analysis. And again, so I'm just gonna go through these really quickly. You'll have some.
This list doesn't have eliminating right turn on red.
That'll be included. This is just kind of a selection of some of the more popular ones.
Okay.
I think we have over 65 to 70 different strategies that could be used. So the plan will have these strategies that are recommended, again, based on kind of crash types, intersections, and then it'll provide roughly what the cost is to be able to give communities a better idea budget-wise, and it includes these notes of effectiveness. So roadway reconfiguration, road diets is something that, as we met with community staff from across the region, there's a lot of interest in this. And so I think that there'll probably be quite a few recommendations for that within this plan. roundabouts. You guys are doing well here with roundabouts, so I don't need to describe those. You know, and again, a lot of these are kind of infrastructure engineering based interventions. Some of them are planning, so like corridor access management here, looking in commercial areas and you know, looking at what can be done to reduce driveway densities, things like that. Bike lanes, and you know, acknowledging that there are certain bike lanes that are better than other bike lanes in terms of construction and installation, which varies the cost and varies the effectiveness of them. Crosswalk visibility enhancements, so high visibility crosswalks, intersection lighting. This program does there's a lot of interest in intersection lighting and research behind that. Advanced yield and stop markings. We don't see a whole lot of raised crosswalks in Wisconsin. There's a few. WSDOT said that they are acceptable and you can include them in. It makes it very difficult for snow plowing, and they don't survive the plow very well.
They have raised intersections on the new Monroe Street. I think that's a great treatment because it's easier to plow and reminds drivers that they're in a pedestrian zone.
Yep. Pedestrian refugee islands, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Again, we're seeing a lot of these out and about. And then I have a few slides in here. So besides these, you know, hardscape, we're gonna go in and we're gonna do it right now type activities. The Safe Streets and Roads for All program provides funding for demonstration type activities.
Sidewalks was not one of your solutions that you showed there. How come?
She wants to get reelected.
Like I think we have a listing of 65 different strategies. So there will be recommendations for sidewalks.
Do you have what are a couple recommendations for the rural rooms? Because that was a high level of.
That I haven't looked at yet to see what we have. I know that the Dane County Traffic Safety Commission is some of the ones that we've looked at before. Some of that has some of the, depending on the cause of the crash, I think on 14 maybe, we saw an issue with run off the road crashes with, they were able to put some pavement friction treatments because in wet weather you were getting people sliding off. So I would imagine that those maybe, yeah, rumble strips,
And sometimes with the run off the road crashes, some of the higher injury and fatality ones are because of some infrastructure off the roadway, like a culvert wing wall or a telephone pole or something like that. So sometimes it's not even road treatments to actually treat those issues.
Clear zone violation.
As long as we've derailed you momentarily. I noticed your bike lane graphic had the bike lane between the travel lane and the parked cars rather than using the parked cars to protect the bike lane. I'm just wondering, was that a conscious choice or?
I think that was the easiest photo to get presently, because that's what we see a lot of. But as I said, you know, we acknowledge and through looking at, they're called crash modification factors, there's bike lanes that are designed better than others in terms of safety.
You gotta talk to Getty Images.
Yeah.
It's stock photos,
Yeah.
need more stuff.
I mean, there was
Stock
just
photos.
that recent high-profile case in Hollywood. Some fairly well-known director was in the bike lane and got doored, and then that sent him into the lane of traffic where he was killed by the oncoming vehicle.
So here, one of the things that, like I said, the program program accounts for, is what's called demonstration projects. So, you know, it might be, you wanna test out like a mini neighborhood roundabout, things like that. That can be done with some of these temporary delineators. You can see, okay, is this gonna work? Is it not gonna work? Do some before and after analysis and then go in and actually construct it if it shows. Our consultant, part of our consultant team is KL Engineering, so they are very familiar with the area and have been on this. But the other one is SRF out of Minneapolis. They've provided us some great examples from Minnesota DOT, great resources for if you're interested in looking at demonstration type projects, how to set those up, kind of best practices, things like that. And that includes some of these various MUTCD engineering studies. So looking at warrants for use of edge lines, setting safe speed limits, bike treatments. There's a lot that can be done.
Edge lines you're talking about, what are also called fog lines?
Mhm.
Okay, not edge lane roads.
Yep, correct. And then it also includes some of these pilot programs for behavioral or operational activities, so kind of education campaigns. A big part of the safe systems approach. So this is looking at safe vehicles, safe people, safe roadways. I'm gonna get one of them mixed up. Safe speeds and emergency
response.
and so looking at, you know, some of these emergency medical services response to crashes, if there's different dispatching methods and communication lines, things like that. I think we can go past that one. So the Safe Streets and Roads for All program itself, the funding program, it has $1 billion per year over 5 years. The second round of funding was just announced on Monday, and City of Madison got, I think it was 6.5 million, somewhere around that, for implementation grants. So there's these two different pots of money as part of that $1 billion per year. The first is planning and demonstration grants. So you can get funding to create, if you wanted to at a local level, like a Vision Zero plan. It does, both of these programs have a 20% local match requirement. And what we've been hearing from the consultant is the planning and demonstration grant side of things. Pretty much if you apply, you will get money. It's been very undersubscribed, and they want to give.
Everybody gets money.
Yep, they want to give that money out. The implementation grant side of things, so that's once you have a plan that is adopted that meets their requirements, then if there are roadway construction projects that were identified in there, you can apply for construction funding through that program, and that has been very, very, very competitive. There's no formula base in this, so it's strictly looking at fatal and serious crashes, and you're competing with New York, you're competing with Chicago, you're competing with LA. It's hard to get some of those funds, but we've seen it come into the Madison area, and so as part of this planning process, we'll see if we see any potential roadway projects that might be competitive enough to be able to apply for that and be able to help communities with that.
I've been on 2 webinars on funding these kinds of things in 2 days, and SS4A is only one of them. There are a lot of, I think there were 9 federal programs that help fund active transportation or safety. So I've started a conversation with Ross about which of these things we should be strategizing to apply for. Clearly, Safe Streets for All's planning grant is like got to be number 1 on our list, because that will allow us to develop our roadmap.
And I think one of the things that we've learned from our consultant with the planning grant side of things, like right now, what we're thinking the MPO will probably do once we get the plan adopted, is that within the planning grant, they have what's called the supplemental planning grant. And so once we have our approved plan, you can apply for this funding and do speed studies, you can do corridor studies.
Detailed
Yep.
planning.
Yep, a lot more detailed, that can still be a toolbox to help people. And so this is looking at, again, if you were wanting to apply for implementation funding, again, it's prioritizing those fatal and serious injury crashes. It's problem specific. It's prioritized for underserved communities. And the total application, I think, is max 10 pages of all of the information that's required, so it's very condensed, but you have to have a very cohesive project scope for those construction projects, have the detailed cost estimates, things like that, so something to keep in mind moving forward.
So the design and demonstration, the planning dollars, that can be used to purchase equipment that you need in order to do your study? Or is this like for services only?
That I would have to check on. I think that's services only.
You should be able to buy things like delineators and stuff.
Yeah,
for the quick build project.
Yeah, for the demonstration side of
He's
things.
asking about traffic counters and
Right.
radar guns and things like that.
Yeah.
I have 2 car traffic counters and
Are
I've
you
got
bragging?
and I've got money budgeted for some pedal bike counters, so.
Yeah, I'm just, it's great to have a plan, but if you don't have the equipment to implement the plan,
So yeah, that's something that we can look at and see what's all included in that. From a regional standpoint, so one of the things with the program is they prioritize if they're getting one application from a large area versus all the individual communities applying on their own, more so for the implementation side of things than the planning grant side of things. And so in the future, with future rounds of funding, when we're done with this plan, the intention is we can look at it again from that regional standpoint, go out and meet with each of the communities, see who wants to participate, and there would still be that local match requirement, but have that pooled together in a larger application to show that regional vision.
Bill, if we needed stuff that wasn't eligible for funding, we could buy it as part of the 20% match too.
Yes, that
Okay.
is correct. And there's just a couple informational slides here. I had mentioned that supplemental activities that's under the planning pot. So here you can see road safety audits, safety analysis and data collection. The stakeholder engagement is a big aspect of this. And so going out and doing focus groups, funding for that and the educational campaigns. A lot of data is eligible under this. And we've already kind of gone over these demonstration activities that are eligible as well. And as I said, the lessons learned with the funding program itself, those construction dollars, very competitive. But the planning side of things, right now, what we're hearing is it's a pretty sure bet. I think that's it.
Well, this has been amazing because this will allow us to stand on the shoulders of giants as we proceed here. Questions from commissioners for Colleen that haven't already been asked?
I do have one in terms of the data, because we do have a GIS coordinator here and we have a city map. I don't know if it's possible to have the data in a format where we could add it to our city map.
So we have all of the GIS data, and I think on a city map, I think as we're rolling it out, there'll be kind of an explanation of the high injury network. I think you'd want to see that versus, like I said, the drilled down detail information gets very technical and might be a little overwhelming.
A little too
Yeah,
much.
and I think having it separate from our map would be nice, but still, useful to cross-reference, obviously.
If ever we need it, we can get a layer and add it to our map at any time. It sends stuff back and forth all the time between the region and the city.
Be interesting.
It's not even clear to me where one ends and the other starts.
And then you can see all the infrastructure that we have
Mhm.
associated with it, it's really easy to nail that out.
So the goal of 0 deaths and serious injuries by 2040 sounds impossible given today's car technology. And so I'm wondering, how much of this plan is really, well, in the future, we expect that dynamic headlights will become the norm, radar that automatically stops when it sees something will become the norm, that kind of, how much of this is like gonna be due to local action versus just changes in technology with vehicles?
We had, like I said, a great discussion around goals, and I wanna say that I think it was Mayor Esser from Sun Prairie, his point was, when we made a decision that we wanted to go to the moon, we made that bold goal saying we're gonna get there, not knowing how we're gonna get there. Having that aspirational goal was what caused us to say, okay, to achieve that, this is what we need to do. Again, looking at business as usual is not working anymore. So looking at what can we do from the public health side of things, looking at policies, looking at, across the board and integrating it to get to that point. I believe it's Hoboken, New Jersey has had a Vision Zero plan, and they have, they've been able to achieve it.
They've got 0 for 2 years in a row.
Yeah, and that was due to an awful lot of local action.
Yeah, so there's the safe system approach, safe speeds, safe vehicles, safe streets. So that's our job, is to make sure the streets are safe and the sidewalks and the paths. It's gonna be the industry and the people who regulate them, to a certain extent Wisconsin, for safe cars and other vehicles. Right now, we're working for truck underride guards, which will be very important, but that industry is resisting it. So there'll be actions going on at all levels.
And I think especially vehicles, things like that, when we're talking about safety, the more, people are understanding some of the implications of the bigger vehicles and, how much more danger it is for a vulnerable roadway user with them.
EVs are quieter and heavier.
Yes, that, when that's at least acknowledged at the local level, and you're hearing that more and more and more across the region, across the states, that brings the voices to those, policymakers and hopefully auto agencies, and, shows the commitment that this is a problem and what are we gonna do to address it. But, again, cars, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
Redesign a car just for Fitchburg or Dane County.
Last session, Milwaukee advanced a bill in the legislature to allow Class 1 cities to do photo enforcement.
Okay.
And it got a hearing, because I testified at it, but it didn't go forward. But those kinds of things are getting on people's radar, and if they get on people's radar, then they get on legislators' radar, and there's hope. Because that's a great, effective countermeasure.
Yeah, so 2 things from NHTSA, I think. One is, within a couple of years, every new car is gonna be equipped with some kind of a sobriety meter. And there was talk of speed governors that, at least there was talk of it. Like geofence speed governors, so depending on where you are, you can, there was that high profile crash a year ago where somebody was somehow going 100+ miles per hour on a 25 mile per hour street and took out about 8 people.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions for Colleen?
This was really interesting, so thank you.
Yes.
All right, the next thing on our agenda is going to be Vision Zero, next steps, as we approved that change. That was 7C. And we already know about, from what little self-education we've already done, that we'll need a council resolution, we'll need a roadmap. But the fact that the MPO has created the high entry network for us is just a great step forward. So does the MPO have a template for localities to, I mean, the Vision Zero network does, but do you, based on what you have already done, have a template for how our our village, cities, and towns in the MPO district can move forward on this?
I guess as far as looking at creating resolutions or.
We need a resolution, we need a high entry network, we need a safety plan. We need to apply for funding to help pay for some of this. I know that our electeds, 2 of whom are here, will be eager to know that there is help in paying for things. And that we can do more if we take some of our current transportation budget and make it into local match and leverage it that way. And do things that not only that we were already going to do, but also, I mean, when we redo roads, that's always a great opportunity to address some of these things.
Steve, just briefly, how does the Vision Zero add to what she's talking about? I mean,
Well, it is Vision Zero in other words.
yeah.
In other words, the county-wide or the MPO-wide safety plan is a Vision Zero plan because Vision Zero is their goal, and the US DOT funding is set up to fund Vision Zero programs. They call it Safe Streets and Roads for All. So really, it was premonitious that we picked that as a project because of the work they're doing and the funding that's coming from the state and federal levels. And because it subsumes so many of the other things that we thought about doing too.
But I mean, why would we not just say, we're gonna hitch our wagon to this horse and
Well, we are.
go with it? Why is it necessary to have 2 parallel named
Well, I think
ventures?
Fitchburg having a Vision Zero, initiative would be part of the MPO's overall goals, right? I mean, ideally, every municipality that you touch would have a Vision Zero initiative, right?
A Vision Zero initiative, again, the way that MPO is set up, since we don't have any regulatory powers, we don't build roads, it's helping set those priorities.
You
but
could
at-
whisper in everyone's ear.
Yeah, at the local level, it's Fitchburg looking at your codes, looking at your policies and making those changes to be able to implement it.
And since we have only 18% or whatever it was of some of these problems, then we're the level that are going to look at them in more detail. And we have a separate budget from our neighbors. And as we'll be talking about later with respect to traffic calming, which is very much a part of this, one of the limiting factors is always money. And but also staff time and consultant capacity. And so we prioritize. And so having the data that says, this is an underserved neighborhood and this is where we need to invest, and this is of an intersection type that is shown to be a crash hazard, this is where we need to do this project next. So those are great advantages to have that kind of data. I don't think that there was a conscious effort in the Safe Streets for All to not call it Vision Zero. But there is a Vision Zero network that's a nonprofit that organizes these things around the country, so maybe they did avoid saying Vision Zero. But I don't think it's a trademark of anybody.
And I think the other thing is that adopting a Vision Zero ordinance and plan then is a way for council to direct staff to prioritize these things.
It's a way for the city to implement what she's talking about.
Exactly, yeah. But to implement the stuff she's talking about, we need the buy-in from council and staff to actually do the work, so.
You have, one question, so you have the miles outlined like the red on the map, do you have additional, like, do you drill down farther and say like rank the intersections by whatever your model says, or like, could we get a ranking of what the intersections?
I have to go back. I don't know if we've developed a full ranking for the segments. We have the rankings for intersections. So we can provide that. And I think the other thing I might not have said is I was talking about the high injury network. We have the data for all of its arterial and collectors. So even if it didn't show up as a red line, we still have the data for those segments as well too.
You have not got comparable data for all roads, right?
Correct, we don't.
So
but-
for example, a busy local road that is not a county highway, et cetera, like a Wayland Road connecting Fitchburg to Verona, might not be in your database.
I have to go.
Wayland, I think is,
I
I
think
think Wayland's a collector.
Yeah,
Okay, so if it's a collector or above?
yeah.
Something like Osmondson Road
Okay,
might not be.
okay. Well, this is supposed to be a commission discussion. What are our next steps? I know that one thing we have to do is we have to get a resolution at some point, and another thing we have to do is make sure that council members know what the heck we're talking about when we put a resolution in front of them. So we made just a little start at that with our presentation a couple months ago. But I would be interested in hearing from Gabriella and Bill what you think it's going to take for your colleagues to sign off on this, besides a lofty goal and a gigantic quiver of methodology arrows and a possibility of outside funding. What else do we need?
More metaphors?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, having, that would be good, yes.
You're welcome.
You know, if they're informed of what the MPO, you know, of essentially this presentation, I think that can also lend a bit of support, you know, and it's not as if we're going off and doing something oddball.
Crazy,
when,
yeah.
When the MPO is, you know, actively encouraging us to do this, I think that's gonna help.
Building the foundation.
Right.
I also think the council's very primed for something like this, because I mean, we get so many inquiries about traffic constantly. Like, I mean, it's as you know, it's like a constant part of being a council member, and we're very aware of it, so it's an issue that council members naturally care about.
Is it congestion or safety that people are yelling at you about?
Safety.
Safety, really? Good.
I don't hear anything about congestion,
No, I've
on my
never,
end at least.
Okay, great.
I've
well,
never heard anything either.
I remember years ago when the concern was about traffic, it was about congestion and being able to get any place on the belt line and stuff. Do you think that Colleen's presentation would be cow material, committee of the whole?
I think I'm not sure that I don't know we need to get into this much detail, and if we were to, I would focus more on the Fitchburg aspects of it, and maybe do more broad overview of some of the other things, but, I mean, I think it's definitely
And I think
appropriate
that
for a committee
an
level.
emphasis on the prep work that the MPO is doing for Safe Streets for All and the glide path that you're preparing us for, another metaphor for you. So this is going to be well-traveled territory by all of our peer communities.
I will add, so you're probably very much aware that Madison has embraced Vision Zero. Sometimes outside communities say, well, they've got a little more resources, it's a little bit different. Sun Prairie is working on a Vision Zero plan. I think they currently have an RFP out that's due, I think, the end of this week, to hire on a consultant to do a Vision Zero plan. So that might be, you know, some mining that you can do there too to see what they've done to get to that point.
I was gonna ask, you know, how much collaboration between, you know, the various municipalities under your purview is there right now, and how much ought there be when trying to coordinate an effort such as this?
So that's really the reason why MPOs were first created, is to try and be able to facilitate some of that conversation. And again, looking at our region from a staffing level perspective, Madison has a lot of resources, they have a lot of staff. You've got other smaller communities that have staff that are wearing multiple hats, and they know it's an issue, but they just don't have the time to be able to dig into it. And that was really kind of one of the genesis of why we did this, is to at least be able to try and give some of that data out and start identifying that. But I think one of the things the MPO is looking at doing in the future is being able to offer some like local technical assistance type programs where, if there's things that you want to do that you just don't have the capacity and staff level wise capacity to do, we can help with. So that's kind of been our engagement with communities up until this point. But in terms of safety, I think this plan has really been kind of kicking it off. As I said, a lot of people have been very interested in it. They've said, we know it's an issue, we just haven't gotten to devote the staff time to really push it forward. And so, we're hoping that this will be that vehicle to
There is an ongoing collaboration that started out with Middleton, Sun Prairie, and Fitchburg with respect to police. And now, last I heard, there are 5, including Verona and Monona. Would there be a synergy in reaching out? I know Sun Prairie has already left the starting gate, but would there be synergy in multiple municipalities of a peer size going out to work on this together, or do you immediately devolve into your local issues and there's not that much synergy, do you think?
I think for the planning level, it really gets down to that local level, since it's looking at what's your policy, your code, things like that. I think the synergy is more so like with the funding piece, with those construction projects, the implementation, they're looking to see if you've got a region that they've all said, bicycle safety is a priority, and we've identified, these key regional corridors, and we want to do these types of projects, having that regional approach for the actual implementation side of things.
But that sounds like the synergistic parts of working across the region are the parts that the MPO has already grabbed and taken on. So we should not so much worry. We could still take advantage of the envy that our council members might feel for Sun Prairie and them being ahead of us. But other than that, we should be independent, perhaps.
I think for looking at your own, from the planning and policy level.
Because nobody else is going to look at ours. That's our job.
But, so in terms of, selling this to the rest of the council, I think if we could say, hey, Sun Prairie, Madison has already done this, Sun Prairie has left the starting gate, and we're hearing whisperings from Verona and Stoughton that they're gonna do this, this is a growing trend, and it, who's not for safety?
I think the council will be amenable to it. I'm not sure it's gonna take a huge lift.
Well,
My
then
one-
we can help sway the neighboring municipalities.
My one concern is just in terms of you trying to run committee the whole time.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be difficult. So if you can create a presentation that's 30 minutes and say we can get in and out in 30 minutes and try to slot into one of our more open meetings, or maybe even consider a light council agenda month to be a part of the council packet. I think we should be open to that if we want to move it forward quickly. And the other things to note is I'd be interested in when the grant deadlines are.
Okay,
For the grant.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if I said that, but this might come into play with your discussion. So as part of our planning process and contract that we have with the consultant, it was a 2-part, do this regional plan, and then there was some funding in it to help put together a regional application. The next round of funding, each round of funding, they've moved up from the previous year, and so we were anticipating it was gonna be later in the year. It'll come out in February. Our plan will be done in February.
So that'll be the notice of funding opportunity?
Yep.
And when will the deadline be? Likely about 2 months later?
We, again, everything.
You'll find out then.
The program has changed each time. We are anticipating probably about 2 to 3 months is what it's been. So from a regional application, we won't go until the following year. Just because communities have been very interested, but they said if we need to get the local match, we've got to take it through our planning process and we can't get it done.
So that's the one thing about the money, is that we, in the budget process, put aside $115,000 of contingency funding for the calendar year. So there's money that we can tap into that
So,
doesn't always exist in the
Do you
budget.
know about Sun Prairie's RFP as a comparable size city? Do you know what they put out there for a budget for
For
that?
funding, I don't. I can get that easily for you.
Yeah.
Because the budget's always the issue, but I mean,
It would
we're
be
talking
interesting to know what what their number is, so that we could take a flyer as to what our number could be. And so if we were to apply for, if there was an award on, this would be round 3, right?
Yep.
If there was an award for round 3 for planning for Fitchburg, when would the money come in?
So what we have been hearing and what our consultant that deals with all the grants has been hearing is it's coming out a little faster each round. The first round, it took about a year to get that grant agreement signed. They're hoping to be able to speed that up, but I would say it's probably not gonna be any faster than 6 months would be incredibly optimistic.
Okay, so if it's going to be, I think you said March?
February,
So-
when
February.
when it opens.
Yeah, so February, so then we're probably talking about April, May due, and 6 months later. Now we're talking about implementation in 2025, right?
Being able to start working on your plan with
On the
with
plan,
them,
you
yeah.
get money and, right?
Yep.
So that means that it would be 2025 budget. And
We couldn't set aside the money in this calendar year budget for the matching funds?
You'd need to have, you have to have a funding commitment as part of the grant application that you have the funding in place for.
well, we would have that budget, we could have it in the capital budget this summer and in the 2025 budget in the fall.
True.
In recent years though, maybe I just talked to, Misty's been putting in budget amendments for grant.
Yeah,
Like,
and
for
we could
literally
amend the
just grant
budget.
commitments without actually allocating.
Right, so the Vision Zero resolution could include a commitment and get a 2/3 vote, and that would allocate contingency funds if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the money exists, is what I'm saying,
Okay.
it's like it exists in the budget, so, which is rare, I think, for.
All right, so next steps are, so far I'm thinking, are find out, we need a ballpark. Sum for planning in round 3 and Sun Prairie. And we want to talk to the council about this possibility and show them the timeline. And so 30 minutes at Cow. We would have to have staff time to look at the NFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, in February. And we would have to get that grant done. Now, Colleen, is it your experience looking at Sun Prairie or anything else you know, is that going to take anything this year in terms of money, or would it only take staff time to apply?
So I will say with
Or do you hire a consultant to write the grant?
you know, I would say for the implementation side of things, you probably definitely need consultant assistance. So you need to have those detailed cost estimates. from what I've been hearing, we didn't apply for it since we had the funding for it already. I think if you're applying for the planning side of things, that might be something that you're able to do without a consultant.
Without any help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the one thing to note with Sun Prairie, their plan is not being funded through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. That was an award through our TAP program.
Okay. Okay, so I have four things right now. Find out ballpark estimate, get ready to do the cow, analyze the NFO in February, and apply by April or May.
And Steve, it's worth noting that in the 2024 budget, we've got $75,000 set aside to hire a grant writer for the city.
Okay.
But when they get hired,
They'll be
Yeah,
immediately faced with a backlog too.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
So
so,
7 grants that people want for trees and
Yeah.
playground, yeah.
I don't know how that work is gonna be prioritized.
That'll be interesting.
Or, you know, if and when we're gonna be able to hire someone for that position.
It's just consultants though.
Oh, that's true.
It's
Yeah,
not- it's not a
Right, it's not,
job,
yeah, it's
yeah.
not an FTE.
It's not staff. Are there other missing pieces that anybody sees that we need to be more concerned with? So, what about the resolution? That would have to come
So.
before the application?
Not for the planning grant. So I think we need to, I can see if I can find the previous notice of funding opportunity. I think you need to demonstrate that there is a commitment that you want to pursue Vision Zero. I don't believe that you need to have, because that's part of the planning process
Okay.
with this funding. I don't believe that you need to have, this is our number by this date before you apply for it.
But we should have that in place before we apply for an implementation grant.
Because the implementation grant would fund the activities of the plan. I think it wouldn't hurt to have a council resolution to say, we're going down this road, and that we will pursue Vision Zero and that we will pursue this grant, and we will use the grant to make our Vision Zero pledge and our implementation plan, because that would show that commitment. So I'll call that a pre-resolution.
and, I mean, just on my end, this grant will take some time. So
Yes.
having that
I have right here.
Sometimes
Yeah.
Staff, spelled ROSS. But as I have told you offline, we have some volunteer time that we can tap that have expertise too. Not engineering, but, you know, GIS and grant writing and stuff like that. So I was going to ask, you've been very quiet.
He's
What
probably
do
just
you-
working.
what do you think our next step should be, and what are the tar pits we should avoid falling into, and what are your other ideas?
I think moving towards applying for the planning grant is a great next step, and having the council buy-in to actually go that direction is a necessary pre-step to that.
And so if we get a planning grant, could some of those funds be used to, to beef up our bicycle and pedestrian plan, which is all part of this, can fit in within Vision Zero as well?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it depends on what we
And
write in the
it's
grant.
eligible.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the webinars, this was from People for Bikes, the one today, they were talking about some really successful, amazing grants where they went out and they got some of these things we can't do in Wisconsin, but they got a half-cent sales tax for 10 years or something. and they sold it. The bicycle advocates were pushing this and providing the volunteer effort and doing community organizing and so, but they never said bikes. They talked about safe streets for everybody, and they said including drivers were in the yard signs. And they had some other guidelines, like in their case, one of the things they went for was general obligation bonding, and that's a limited time thing. In another case, they went for a sales tax, and it failed when they tried to make it permanent, but when they said, okay, it's going to be for 10 years, then they were able to get the public to vote for it for a referendum and pass it. And they specifically said that as a strategy, don't have a bike and ped plan.
Interesting.
Have a transportation plan and do everything at once. Do your transit plan and your bike and ped plan and your street safety plan and your ADA plan, all as one big thing, and get ARP and the PTO and everybody else all into your coalition. And that sounded really good to me. And if we were to take that kind of an approach and say, well, the bike and ped plan is really part of our Vision Zero and Safe Streets plan, then we could make some funding that has been already allocated for that part of this bigger project too.
I do think that would also probably council input, because currently those are under multiple different committees,
Yep,
so.
indeed. Yeah, the bicycle committee reports to Public Works, right?
Yeah, Phil, I think Phil,
Yeah, Phil's the
Ruby is
staff
the-
contact.
he's- He's a little
He's
mix
plan
between.
He's
land
in planning,
department.
yeah,
He's a little bit of public works too, though. He's kind of in the center
yeah.
of multiple departments.
In any event, we should wrap this up. We really appreciate you coming. Is there anything else that we should note for the record in terms of next steps? We'll be calling you.
Good.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen.
All right, that brings us to 6B, which we're also taking out of order before 6A, approving the amended traffic management process. We will get a motion on the table. We will hear public input, and we'll have our discussion, and if there are any amendments, I know there's a staff report on this. So let's start out with a motion, please.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Bill, thank you. Our guests are lighting up. Thanks for bearing with us for all that time. I hope you found that discussion also interesting. Thank you, Jay, for dropping this off. We just got it in about 5 or 10 minutes before the meeting, and we were able to scan it. You can each have 3 minutes, and we may also have questions for you at the end. So do you have a plan of which of you is to go first? Because I know you're coordinating.
Yes, we do. And Sue feels that she'd like to go first.
All right. And since you are coordinating, I just give both of you together 6 minutes. How's that?
No, that's fine. I don't think we'll need that much. We appreciate that, but hopefully our remarks will come in under 6 minutes.
Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, okay, the city's proposal for you is to use the already in-place neighborhood traffic management process as the basis to expand it to higher density and commercial areas of Fitchburg with a rename of the process which removes the word neighborhood. Unaltered, this will adversely affect low and medium density residential areas. A growing number of residents are becoming concerned about the process. Therefore, we ask you to consider our email communication from this morning, which is the same as the handout we provided for the meeting. We do agree with 7 of the 12 amendments proposed, and with adoption of our requests, I think those opposing wholesale change to the NTMP would be reassured that traffic management within neighborhoods will still be within the control of the residents of the neighborhood. And Jay will continue with additional comments now.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and thank you for all the work you do for Fitchburg. As Sue mentioned, there's a staff memo dated November 16th that presents a summary of the 12 major amendments being proposed to the process. And the email that we sent this morning, and now a copy of that also has been made available, hard copy, goes through details about 5 of the 12 amendments. We think some further revision is appropriate, and the handout provides information about the background for those items. And then there are 2 items we think should be added to the staff recommended revisions to the process. And the handout goes into detail about those as well. This evening, I would like to just talk about a couple of the items, and then we'd be available for questions if you had anything you felt you needed clarification. And I do want to thank Ross for putting together that November 16th memo. I think he did a good job with that, and I also want to thank him for bringing the hard copies today. We appreciate that. The 2 items I'd like to talk further about are, we've suggested a provision be added to the updated process that cross-references previous resolutions by the council in 2016 and 17 dealing with the installation of sidewalks in existing neighborhoods. There's a figure 3.5 in the existing bicycle and pedestrian plan that delineates those neighborhoods, and there's an appendix in that plan that talks about the conditions under which sidewalks could be installed in those existing neighborhoods. And since the resolution that will be adopted next year by the council pertaining to the traffic management process is a subsequent enactment, we think it would be appropriate to include a provision in that enactment that indicates that the resolutions adopted in 16 and 17 are still in effect and not superseded by the resolution making changes to the traffic management process. Secondly, with respect to the resolution that actually would do this, that is one of the attachments to this agenda item. It was referred to this committee and also to the Board of Public Works. And we think it would be appropriate, given the situation on Osmondson Road, to include a provision that indicates that the money in the capital improvement plan that was approved in July of this year, there have been several contacts on our part with elected officials, and we've been assured that that 50K that's in the SIP is for the purposes of a placeholder that can be used for a project that emerges from this traffic management process. And so we think it would be appropriate to include in the resolution wording that we've offered. I think it's item, let's see, I think it's 4C. Yeah. There's wording there, and then in 5C, we provide additional background for that suggestion. We think that amendment would be germane because there was a community action request submitted in July, and we've done a survey of residents in September between Highway PD and Pembroke Drive, and 2/3 of the residents felt there's a strong sense that something needs to be done about speeding on Osmondson. And a large number of residents feel that they're comfortable with speed humps or stop signs, but they really don't like the idea of bike lanes. And I really don't want to get into a debate about bike lanes tonight. I think it's sufficient to say they are appropriate in certain circumstances, but for the purposes of Osmondson between PD and Pembroke, there seems to be strong support for alternative traffic calming measures.
And I just like,
So I think that, and then one other closing point.
Jay,
Yes.
can you wrap up in just a sentence? You're over time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we would appreciate if there a response to these comments and the comments at the Board of Public Works meeting on this same topic are made available when the council takes this up for final approval. And thank you again for the time this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I do have some questions, but first, anybody else have any questions for Susan or Jay?
Not for them.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have our discussion in a second, and I have a question for staff too. Any questions for them?
Yeah. Okay, so what, can you tell us what the objections are, generally speaking, to sidewalks? I just want to, are you morally opposed to the idea of sidewalks? Or do you not want to have to deal with the expense and the maintenance, or is it some third thing? Walk me through objections to sidewalks.
It's a great question. I think, as a general perspective in the neighborhood on Osmondson, that the big issue is disrupting an existing neighborhood and all the trees and vegetation and other aspects to it. I think that the vast majority of my neighbors, and myself included, feel that we agree with the provisions in the ordinances for development of new neighborhoods that sidewalks be installed when residential subdivisions are put in. I think the issue here basically is retrofitting an existing neighborhood that wasn't designed for this purpose, and people, made decisions about where they were going to live and houses they were going to buy based upon what's here. And so coming in and installing sidewalks retroactively, I think that's the biggest single issue. I know there's issues about whether we got to shovel it, and there's other stuff going on. But I think the bottom line is that really people really love this neighborhood, and they think that installing sidewalks would be disruptive to the ambience of the neighborhood.
Okay, quick follow-up. If we could just snap our fingers and cost was no object, and we just take that very wide road and we move the curb and gutter and install sidewalks where there used to be asphalt or used to be curb and gutter, is that something that people would find palatable, or are we still, you've listed basically the trees and the landscaping and such as the primary reason people don't want it, but is there more?
It's a great question. I really can't answer that for anybody else tonight. I'd have to talk to people, but with respect to my own perspective on it, if the funding could be found for something like that, I think there might be support for it, because Osmondson curb to curb right now is 42 feet.
Right.
But if there was a major rebuild to bring it much narrower in conjunction with something, or let's multi-use path on one side as opposed to sidewalks on both. But that's going to be pricey, and in this instance, I guess it could come down to whether that would be subject to special assessments to recover the cost of all that work, or if it would be something that would be covered by the city and or grants. So, sorry, I can't be more specific on that one, but I'd be happy to have a dialogue about it at some point. Who knows, when there is a car in for Osmondson, so maybe this could be one of the alternatives considered during that process.
Okay. I have a question that was prompted by something Susan said, so I don't know who wants to answer it. But there was an expression that the neighborhoods were concerned about either the neighborhood traffic management process or the change thereto. But what were those concerns? What were they worried about, presumably in the new proposal? My background is that this allows other places in the city to take advantage of traffic calming besides residential neighborhoods at 25 miles an hour. And it would provide more opportunity for the city to get involved in traffic calming and speed management. Is that what you're concerned, is that what you're objecting to, or is there something I'm not seeing that caused you concern?
So would you like me to answer that? Or maybe you could, why don't you give it a whirl and then I can fill in
Sure.
any other
Yeah,
gaps?
mainly, the process exists currently as something created for neighborhoods. And now, nobody's objecting to the idea of expanding it to address other types of development in the city, whether it's business or high density, et cetera. But by trying to, and actually probably work Ross has done since we met with him, addresses some of this, I think, that taking a process that was designed for neighborhoods, where people who live next to each other and know the street that they're concerned about, and then broadening that to be anything. For example, originally the draft was that 20% of the neighbors could vote in favor of a change, instead of what we currently have, which is 50% plus one have to vote in favor of a change or a plan. So that is where I was referring to the fact that we have a neighborhood process for basically low, medium density, and keep that, or most of the elements of that, in place, and whatever you need to do for other densities or business type developments.
So you're concerned that
is a separate process instead of trying to make everything one.
20% to sign a car,
Right, so
that's
previously.
to originate, go ahead.
Yeah, so previously, or in the current NTMP, you need 50% of households to sign the community action request form to even get this
To start
considered
the
by the
process,
city.
yeah.
And there is also once the neighborhood decides on a treatment, then 50% of the neighborhood needs to vote in favor of it.
Okay,
And
now, in the new process, 20% can kick it off,
yes,
but
and
who gets to decide whether a plan is implemented? Is that back to 50, or is it staff, or what?
that is, in the current new plan, that part is eliminated.
Okay.
So it's a combination of
Okay.
staff, Board of Public Works,
And
TTC.
us. Okay, so you're concerned that you might get a treatment that your neighbors don't want? I mean, the objective here is to get more traffic calming out in the city.
I think we should maybe take a step back to answer your question, because you have an excellent question. We support 7 of the 12 amendments that staff has put forward to the council. We support 7 of the 12. There are 5 that we think need some adjustment. One of them, and Ross has mentioned several of them, one is the provision right now currently to submit a car, 50% of the households on the segment have to sign the petition for the car, as part of the car. That would be lowered to 20%. And we don't have a problem with lowering it in high density and commercial areas. We just think that for low and medium density zoning areas, it would be better to leave it at 50%. Secondly, once it's submitted, a traffic calming committee is created of neighborhood, and they work in consultation with the city engineer and staff. And currently, the process in effect currently allows, once that plan is, so to speak, endorsed, it goes to a survey of the neighborhood, and 50% of the households have to be in favor of that before it can go to the Board of Public Works. The changes that are proposed, there's still a traffic calming committee, but there's no survey of the neighborhood. There's no vote by the neighborhood. So in essence, you could have plans that are advanced to the Board of Public Works that don't have 50% of the households in support. A third provision that we think should be adjusted is the one currently the city engineer is in consultation with the neighborhood.
Jay?
But the proposal is to say that no plan can go to the Board of Public Works that hasn't been approved by the city engineer. And we think, I know there's issues about concerns that something may come up that isn't technically feasible or too expensive, but that can be worked out in the process, and to the extent it can't, if a neighborhood generated plan goes to the Board of Public Works, the city engineer can certainly make recommendations regarding what should or shouldn't be done with that plan. We just think it's premature to shortstop these plans. So there's a constellation here of three things operating together. And then we have the other one, the third rail is that the proposal to have the Transportation and Transit Commission have veto authority over a plan.
Jay?
And that doesn't currently exist. Oh, sorry.
Yes, so I understand that you're basically asking for the process to be returned to the old way for single-family neighborhoods, right? And that's what these amendments are about. What I was asking was, what are you concerned that might happen if it's easier to get traffic calming implemented on the city streets? Are you concerned that you might get a treatment that some people don't like? Are you concerned that you would get unwanted sidewalks? We're trying to make, this process was developed to put hurdles up so that we wouldn't be flooded by requests that we couldn't fill, and to make sure that anytime we started down this road, because there were situations where one or two people proposed something, a lot of city work got put in, and then the rest of the neighborhood rose up in objection. That's why we wanted to make it harder to get traffic calming into neighborhoods back in the aughts. This basically is going to make it easier to get traffic calming into neighborhoods, and you want to keep it just as hard in single-family neighborhoods. And I'm asking, what are you concerned about that might happen?
Well, I'm sorry. I guess that I haven't done a good enough job explaining. We are not trying to make it harder to get traffic calming. And in fact, we agree, I think Sue and myself both agree, that the current process does make it hard. And one of the key features of that is the 85 percentile has to be over 35 miles an hour. And on a
neighborhood wants and what you are afraid will happen, not, tell me what you don't like about the proposed process. What result might happen that you're concerned about?
If all the changes recommended by staff are approved by the council without any further adjustment, traffic calming plans supported by 20% of the residents could be approved.
Right.
By the council, even because there is no survey after the plan is developed by the Transportation or Traffic Calming Committee. And it could wind up that traffic calming measures not supported by a majority of the residents get approved and implemented.
Okay, and can you imagine such a situation? Or give me an example of a traffic calming thing that would be terrible for your street that somebody else might propose?
Well, you know, terrible is in the eyes of the beholder, but something that I think that 2/3 of the people on the segment of Osmondson that I've lived on for many years would feel that if sidewalks were installed because 20% of the people wanted it, filed a car, and then the project was submitted to the council, or I'm sorry, to the Board of Public Works and approved and then implemented, that I think that would be an outcome that really would disturb a lot of people on Osmondson.
Anything besides?
I'm not saying it's likely to happen. I'm just saying, as an example, that's something.
Can I ask?
Yes, go Mike.
Aren't some of these issues resolved by this memo from December 12th?
So
The,
there is another staff memo that I wrote after meeting with Jay and Sue on Monday that contains additional recommendations to this board, and then it's gonna go to Public Works and Common Council once this gets there. One of the things in that new staff memo is recommending that we change the community action request form to require signatures from 50% of households in areas with single-family homes and duplexes, and then to 30% of households in areas with multifamily businesses or other land uses.
yeah.
I think maybe in the.
Yeah,
It's above the staff memo dated November 16th in the packet that got sent out earlier this week. It was an amended packet. I've also got hard copies.
We did print stuff out for him.
okay, thanks very much for, I knew that when sidewalks isn't really a traffic calming feature, sidewalks might be needed in an area like around Firehouse Number 1, where there's a school route and kids are walking in the street and there's too much traffic. It's a safety measure, not a traffic calming measure. But I thought that you were probably concerned about that when it was listed among the remediations. I think it unlikely that we will pass exactly all the amendments that you're proposing, Jay. And that's why I wanted to get to the underlying concerns that you had to, even if we don't do it the way you want it done, that at least we are trying to address your concerns.
It's definitely you are, and we really appreciate you taking time to dig down this deep on this topic.
Questions for Jay or Susan? I have two questions for staff. First one is, Jay represented, and this was not my understanding of it, but I had not read it closely as he has apparently. Did the neighborhood ever control the traffic calming, or was that?
So this process was always a collaborative effort between the neighborhood, staff, and Board of Public Works.
And when you say neighborhood, you really mean the TCC, right?
Yes, and the rest of the neighborhood with.
To the extent that they communicate with them.
Yeah, and there was the
The
survey,
traffic calming committee.
which is made up of neighborhood residents.
A very
It's formed when you submit the.
Yes.
A very unfortunate action.
To work to do a lot of proofreading.
Okay, so we gotta hurry. Did the neighborhood have veto power then over what the engineer had
The
said?
neighborhood did not have veto power.
They
But neither had
collaborated.
Staff. It
Right,
would just go to Board of Public Works.
Okay. All right. And then the second question is, can you tell us the status of the car for Osmondson? It's Pembroke to PD. And what is it that, where are they in the process and what is being proposed or considered if it's gone that far?
So this section of Osmondson has the required number of signatures, and would be moving into phase 2 treatments because we've done phase 1 treatments. But this section of Osmondson does not meet the 85th percentile threshold. The 85th percentile speed needs to be over 35 miles per hour, and Osmondson is at about 33.
And so,
And has been
under
for
the
several
unmodified
studies.
plan, then they're done, right?
Right.
And so we need to, even to move their project forward, we need the new plan.
Some form of it, yeah.
Or break it or something, okay. Any other questions for staff?
I do, so with your new memo, I know why you changed it for single-family homes. Can you explain why you went from 20% to 30% for non?
Thank you.
So that was to address some internal pushback from other staff members on that felt like 20% might be making it too easy.
Okay,
So that was something through several
Does-
internal staff meetings we agreed to.
and that's why you, and then also it seems like eliminated the or 5,
Yes, because
or I guess
the
it's
reason
not
for the
relevant
5
then,
as a
but-
minimum was because in a single family neighborhood, you could get a really low number of households hitting that 20%. But raising that back up to 50, you kind of eliminate that.
It's 50% to, I mean, we're
Well,
trying
originate
to
the
get
car.
down from 50%, like, was that the purpose of this? Like, you could, there are a number of things, there's in between
So
20 and 50.
The original purpose was spurred by one of Bill's proposals for High Ridge Trail, where if you add in an apartment complex, you really can't get 50% of signatures. You get 100 units in there, you need 50 signatures.
Yeah, and so your memorandum says 30%. At one point, I thought you had said 30 signatures from an apartment complex,
Right, that was for High Ridge Trail.
specifically for that, okay,
Because
it's
we
a
had
one-off
not
for that.
started down
Okay.
this particular road at that point.
Right. So I think I had looked through this agenda packet when there were 66 pages, so I think prior to this being merged in.
Yeah.
So were is this stuff now merged into the new version in the packet?
Dina sent out an amended agenda packet
Yes.
on Tuesday, I believe, that has this as a separate memo.
Okay.
It basically has 2 memos back to back.
But if we look at the
red
current.
line does not.
The red line does not have this in it, no.
Okay.
Right, and so the brand new version does not yet have these changes merged in?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so,
So,
I would like to, go ahead.
is there a motion on the floor to approve the,
So we have the main motion on the floor, there is no amendment. And so I would entertain a motion to direct staff to incorporate these 4 changes into the language
these 4 being the ones that Ross
From the
has already?
staff.
This
From the
December
staff
12th
memo.
memo.
from the
Staff
staff
amendments,
memo.
okay.
Now, Jay is asking for 50%, or maybe Jay and Susan are asking for 50% to approve something, but that is not in here, right? Only.
Correct.
Yes, so I feel that to say that a majority of homeowners have to, this is in the form of discussion, to say that a majority of homeowners have to approve of a design, of a phase 2 plan, is too high a bar, because it's not just an opinion survey. There's engineering and fiscal issues that have to be addressed as well. And so it could be that everybody wants a roundabout at Osmondson and Schumann, but the money is not there and it's not gonna happen. So I think that 50%, again, this was, I believe it was Richardson in Wildwood South, back in the aughts, where a whole bunch of work got put in on traffic calming because several people had come in and said this is a concern. And city did a lot of work, and then there was a proposal that came up in an open meeting and the neighborhood went ballistic, and a lot of time was wasted and there was lots of bad feelings. And so that was the origin of the neighborhood traffic management process, is that you gotta have 50% of your neighbors on board to do something. But something is not gonna be dictated by the neighborhood because the neighborhood is not engineers. The neighborhood is gonna weigh in on it, but they're not gonna vote for it as a majority. So I disagree that we need a majority of voting in favor even in single-family neighborhoods. I think that this is a good thing.
I'm not sure where this fits into the process but just, I want to state an opinion about this. I think it's borderline crazy to have percentage of homeowners have to approve something before you do it. I think the process should be professionals that work for the city come up with ideas, guided by some kind of criteria, like how much cars are there, whatever objective criteria have been established to go for traffic calming. Staff makes a recommendation. It goes out for public comment through some public hearing process. We have alders to mediate this process and to decide if enough people are for or against it. And I just think it's nutty, and forgive me, Jay, if I say this, I just think it's crazy to have criteria like 20% of something has to agree. It just raises all kinds of problems. 20% of who? 20% of households? What if the husband and wife disagree? What if there's some kids living there? I mean, these are just, I just think it's insane to get into this kind of elaborate process of making what should be decisions made ultimately by the alders who are elected for that purpose. And that's why we elect people, so you can unelect them like you guys did to me. And if you don't like what we think, I
How do you really feel? All right.
Yeah, we need 50% to get the car, and they can go to the website and see, hey, look, these are the phase 2 treatments that, we're gonna get one of these, at least one. We don't know which one, but yeah, we agree, we need some sort of traffic calming. I mean, that sounds like that ought to be enough.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense to have an ability for a group of people in the neighborhood to request that something be reviewed, which is basically what this is. It's like put it on somebody's radar, but then not for that group to have the ability to dictate what the solution is.
Yeah, and then leave it up to experts.
Okay, considering the time, it seems like we are ready for an amendment.
So I'll move to amend to add these 4 bullets as laid out in the December 12th memo.
Second. Second, and staff will make the technical changes to the document to implement these.
Yep.
Any further discussion on this? Yes.
One very quick question. So phase 1 is greater than 200 and phase 2 is greater than 500. So is that, am I correct, or is that if you're not greater than 500, you cannot get a phase 2 treatment?
Correct.
Okay, so there's no.
Not a typo.
Okay, perfect. Good then.
All right, on the amendment, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that was unanimous.
And I just want to make a comment.
Yes, on the main motion.
I think the update is really, really well done, Ross. I know this process has been burdensome, like, for a long time, and I remember trying to talk someone through it, and it was 4 years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know. So, great work. I know that there was some public comment on it. It looks like you addressed some of those things that were reasonable from both the public and from the staff perspective. So I think it's a good change, and I think it's gonna make traffic calming get out to the neighborhoods more. So thank you for your work. I'm happy to support this, and I look forward to seeing it come to council.
I appreciate the extra effort you threw in to get that red line document with the numbers and the documentation behind it that
Seems like it was a non-trivial task.
Word has a good function for it.
Yeah.
That helped.
Track changes.
But it was extra manual labor for you.
Seeing nothing else, all in favor of the main motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record show that was unanimous. And thank you, Susan and Jay, for your input.
Thank you for allowing the opportunity to have it.
You
We
bet.
appreciate it.
Okay, next 6A, ordinance amending chapter 68, prohibiting parking, adding bicycle lanes, etc. Let's start with a motion.
So move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Staff report.
Basically, this goes through several areas that we have had issues with parking. One of them being on Chapel Valley Road, going around a curve that makes it difficult to see pedestrians in a crosswalk. The one on Red Arrow is because of a bus stop. Metro Transit has had issues actually getting their buses to the bus stop. The Radicchio and Mizuna ones are for school traffic. When you add in a bunch of school traffic with people parking on both sides, it gets really difficult to traverse those streets. So that's why it's limited to school days only in those times. Those are consistent with what the rest of the neighborhood already has. And then the next section is to prohibit parking in any marked bicycle lane.
Okay, I have two questions. They both revolve around the legislative intent. Is it required that both bike lane signs and no parking signs must be erected for a bike lane to be no parking? Or is it the legislative intent that bike lane signs and pavement markings are sufficient and no parking signs are not required to make it no parking in a
So-
bike lane?
We would likely put up no parking bike lane signs instead of one or the other. But the intent is not to have both bike lane and no parking signs where there are bike lanes.
Because that's what, then if both were required, then we would be right where we are now. Which is we have to post no parking signs on bike lanes if there to be no parking.
Yes, and we have to add them into the ordinance.
Yes, okay. So with that in mind, this is unrelated. In section 2, no person shall stop, stand, or park in any vehicle in any clearly and appropriately marked bicycle lane. Now, if a bike lane is not clearly and appropriately marked, that's a different problem. I suggest that if it's a marked bike lane with, it might be a faded stripe, but we always have both bike lane signs and stripes and symbols. And I'm asking why we think we need those three words, clearly and appropriately.
Basically to ensure that the city is only enforcing this where it is marked. But I take your point.
I would leave it to the
Marked is-
officers.
Yeah.
And I would also open a work order if something was not clearly and appropriately marked that it should be. And then the Public Works Director is to post no parking signs on the above segments of those 4 roads. And I would delete the and as necessary on roads with bicycle lanes. I would say that new bicycle lanes, we should have the no parking bicycle lane instead of just the bike lane. And if we had to wholesale replace the signs, we should switch them. But I think that the bike lane should be the traffic control device that prohibits parking. And so I would ask for a motion to strike the 3 words in section 2 and as necessary on roads with bicycle lanes in section 4 and move the word and in front of Mizuna Drive to implement that. Because right now we have to put something in the ordinance and we have to put signs up in order to prevent parking in bike lanes. And I want this to change that.
The only question I have though is like, don't we want the signs to go up? Because there are people that don't know, and I
We
understand.
don't want it to
you
be
need-
a requirement.
Well, I know you want people to be able to be cited without a sign there,
Yeah.
but don't we also want the signs there to make it clear that there's no
Yes, we
shift?
do, but we don't want to wait for the signs to start educating the public. In other words, what we would do right now is social media saying, because of this new ordinance, you can't park in bike lanes even if they're not marked no parking. And the public education campaign could start.
But does this preclude citing if there's no sign? And I
Right
guess
now, we can't cite or enforce in any way.
without a sign.
No,
By the way this is,
whether-
no, but I'm talking about by the way this is written.
I don't think those words in section 4 preclude a citation if there's not a sign. That's just a directive to the public works director to post
That's how I read it
those
too.
signs.
Because I want there to be signs, because I think that'll help clarify that there's no parking. But by my reading of it, I think you can still cite someone for being in a bike lane. So I think leaving it because the best of both worlds.
Well,
Because-
there's the cost too. And if, do we have a fiscal impact of the posting no parking signs on bike lanes?
I don't have anything prepared, no.
Ballpark, $10,000?
For maybe that's for half a mile or a mile of road.
Okay, so I think that it's replacing bike lane signs with no parking bike lane signs, which should be like a 5-year, 10-year reflectivity activity. And so that's why I didn't want this in here to have somebody point to it and say, well, there were no parking signs in the bike lane. But if everybody else thinks it's okay,
It'd be good to get clarity from like legal just about before we go to council, but like by my reading of it, I think we could still cite people for being in a bike lane. And then directed doesn't give a time frame for when we do that, but it does like make it clear that we should put the signs up at whatever point we're able to.
And the PD was comfortable with this language with giving citations, but it hasn't gone through the city attorney.
Okay. I mean, it'd be good to clarify before council, and I take your point well, Stephen, in terms of we want
Okay.
people to cite.
well, I'll tell you what, you are our council rep, here is my markup.
Okay.
Now, have at it at council.
There is this vague wording in here, as necessary on roads with bicycle lanes.
Yeah.
However, that's to be interpreted by whomever.
Yeah, I think it should be removed, but I leave it to you who have been elected to take the, so we have no other, I think this is long needed. I pointed out to Ross that a particularly irksome area is where, on Glacier Valley Road, where it is the capital city state trail. And it's marked with bike lanes and residents park on it. And every time they do, I report them and ask PD to send over a civilian service employee to give them a ticket, but right now it's not marked to no parking, and so they can't on that stretch. So
I will make a motion to remove, to strike clearly and appropriately from section.
I was gonna say that, yeah, I agree with that.
I will take that.
Is that-
I'd take that's Gabriella moved and Bill seconded.
Because no person shall stop, stand, or park in any vehicle, in any marked bicycle lane. I think that seems
Yeah,
sufficient.
you don't want people quibbling, well, that wasn't clearly or appropriately marked. It was simply marked.
Too many adverbs.
Okay. All in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, any more discussion on the main motion? Okay, seeing as the time grows late, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. That brings us to the 7A, the RFP. We appreciate you bringing it to us. In the interest of time, we should go quickly. Is there any input that commissioners want to give Ross on this?
Well, I do appreciate seeing it, I especially appreciate the timetable in there.
Yeah.
There's some idea when things are gonna happen.
Yeah, so this is posted on Quest CDN right now. We don't have any plan holders yet, but it closes at whatever the date I said it does in the schedule, and we'll know
reply to that? I have one concern, and that is, I don't think that park and rides should be a goal. And I'm just wondering, they seem to, I mean, I suppose you could have a park and ride that's served by an all-day, everyday bus route, which would be beneficial. People could park there right into Madison, but we don't have really enough all-day, everyday service near land that is appropriate.
The park and rides were previously voted on, I believe,
I
by
mean, we
this
just,
council.
we voted to look
This
at
commission,
these three things.
Okay.
It doesn't mean any of them have to be done in the end. This purpose of this is to find out which is feasible, how much it would cost.
I do think the park and ride is relevant though, because we just talked about it with the BRT. And if there was a park and ride down here, they might be more willing to come down here versus stopping at Lacey. And it came up in the Beltline discussion. So it does seem like it keeps coming up. It's good to look at it.
Specifically connected to BRT, I agree.
Right, yeah.
And
Okay.
in this case, it's already in the RFP that I've published, so.
Yep. So we're not gonna tell you a whole lot that you can do anything about, so,
Yeah, could you go back in time?
I did wanna make a note though about the budget, is I put in an amendment for 50,000 towards supporting this intercity transit feasibility study. We had to amend that down to 24,000 to hit levy limits, but it's actual operating budget money that should stay in the, so it's 24,000 that's dedicated to solutions that are identified in this study.
okay.
I don't know if that'll be enough, but it exists and it'll.
And we already know that there's a contingency.
Yes, there is a contingency, but that's contingency is all one-time funding, so
Okay,
there's no, but anyway, there's money, so.
all right. Well, on behalf of the entire commission, we commend you for getting that out there. North-South BRT, I provided in the packet Bike Fitchburg's positions on the South BRT. The main concern, to boil it all down, is that in order for things to not get worse for bicyclists, we have to have side running with bus, bike, and right turn lanes shared. Because we have no right turn pockets right now, and we don't have the width to add a conventional bike lane and still have 3 lanes for bus and 2 through lanes. So Bike Fitchburg has sent this to staff, to Metro, to you all, to Madison Bikes with respect to our position on Park Street, to Metro, and to the MPO. I wanted to inform you about that because I measured the street width and tried to figure out another way, and there wasn't one.
Well, there is, but it's palatable to only a small fraction of the people, which is to say, remove a lane of car traffic because,
yeah.
hey, we've got mass transit now.
Yeah. So that probably won't fly very well. I especially wanted to debunk the idea that it was good enough to have a multi-use path only on one side of Fish Hatchery Road or Park Street, because there are destinations on both sides of the street. And so how do you
Not
get
to mention that every driveway becomes an intersection that you need to worry about, especially with that retaining wall that limits visibility.
It's much safer to ride in the bike lane than the side path when you have lots and lots of driveways, busy commercial driveways. Do any commissioners feel like we should take a position on this, or do you just want it as a point of information for tonight?
I think that if we were gonna take a position on this, it would have to also incorporate the rest of the transit changes. So
Oh,
like-
absolutely.
Well, I just mean like, I agree with everything that's in here, but if you tell me that putting the buses in the center lane is gonna make them 50% more efficient and carry X number of people, but that and that the trade-off for that is that a small number of people have to walk half a block on their bike, like that might be an acceptable trade-off to this commission. So like, I feel like Fitchburg should be advocating for this, and they should have these positions because they should do what's best for the bikes, but we can't just like sign off on that and say that what's right for bikes is right for all of transit.
No, I agree with you, totally. And the argument for center running is that, Ross probably can tell you better than me, but there are less conflicts with right turners. But I still don't know how they're gonna handle the right-hand lane being a through lane with no right turn pockets.
There'll just be,
They'll have to queue up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there will still be one through lane without any turning
Right.
impacts.
I was only, I mean, I'm somewhat serious about removing a lane of traffic. I mean, just imagine, 20 or 30 years from now, we're gonna look back and say, why the hell did we have all these cars running through our city, right? I mean, so we should think long and hard about suggesting, once you put in the bus infrastructure, it's a much bigger deal to switch that at a later date from right running to center running. And I have to believe that within our lifetimes, even us old folks, we will drop down to one lane of private motor vehicle traffic on Fish Hatchery Road. I mean, it's just the way that everything has to be going. We're a growing city, and you just physically don't have room for all those cars.
I will point out, Fish Hatchery Road is a county highway, so
Yeah.
those are not completely the city's decisions.
Yep.
And if you have a center running bus lane, it's a lot easier to take out or modify the right-hand lane to remove it or make it a bike lane or whatever.
The other option would be a one-way cycle track on each side of the street. It would be separate from the sidewalk, not a multi-use path. And it would need to come down into the intersection to be a safe intersection. Otherwise, you've got bicycles basically crossing in a crosswalk from unexpected directions. So that is doable, and you could keep the curbs where they were, but it would require more space than I think we have there. So, all right, well then we'll take that as an information item. And that brings us to future agenda items. And I apologize for the late running meeting, but
Blame it on Colleen, she's no longer here.
yeah, Colleen ran way over. Anything that we want to see at future meetings besides, well, I'll work with Ross on some of these action items for next steps in Vision Zero. But in addition to that, and in addition to anything that the council sends us, is there anything else that we want to talk about in the future?
One thing, or actually three things that we should keep on our radar is Nine Springs Edition, the South Stoner Prairie, and the Greenfield neighborhood plans.
Yep. And there will also be, but farther down the pike, a Southdale neighborhood plan.
Yes.
And what about the responses to the transit RFP? Do you want us to look at those? The transit study?
So those staff recommendations will be referred out to probably this council or this committee and common council,
That's
so
what I thought.
I think that will be
So that'll
the
be
time
on.
for that.
Okay.
I don't know if this is an agenda item right now, but we're having discussions about referendum right now on council. And as part of a potential package of a proposal for a referendum, the council's on board with including, making it more broad than public safety. In general, companies just do public safety, we would do across the board, hiring in every part of the city, but then also potentially include transit solutions. So that's part of the discussion. I'm not clear on if the council is in favor of how much of the potential referendum amount would be dedicated to transit, but it's on the table. So,
Well,
you know,
that could take care of I think that would be a very worthy idea to cover the operating costs of the BRT extending down here and even the B line, right? What do we get here? D or B?
B.
B. I'm confusing
county route number. B runs on D.
Yeah, to get B down to the civic campus, which is also a possible solution to our transit study, that would be a reasonable funding vehicle because it would be permanent.
Yeah, so I
This
suppose.
will be a referendum to exceed levy limits permanently.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about amounts and options, so I think we're gonna talk about it again in January, so
Yeah.
it's constant in conversation, committee level, so. It's on the
Well,
table.
I thank everybody for staying late tonight, and have a great holiday, and we will see you on January 11th at 6:30.
Very good.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And Steve, I think you did a very good job of expediting this.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Bill.